Well, thanks everybody for joining me today. We're going to go over the 7 critical IT security protection every business must have in place now. And of course, we are talking about cyber attacks, data breaches, lawsuits, bank fraud, identity theft, and all kinds of other great stuff like that. If you're on the call and don't know me, my name is James Pearson, president of the Computer Center. And today we are going to talk about the #1 security threat to your business. And no antivirus, firewall, or other security protocol can protect your company against this. I guarantee everybody has at least one of these in every business. We're going to talk about some shocking truth about bank fraud that can literally wipe out all of your accounts. We're going to talk about why firewalls and antivirus software aren't enough any longer to protect us. And we're also going to talk about ways cyber criminals are attacking us so we can educate everybody on what to do, how to identify them, and we can talk about some next steps. So ultimately, I want everybody to avoid being a sitting duck to the cyber criminals and protect their business and everything that they've worked so hard to achieve. If you stay on the line till the very end, I've got 2 free bonuses for everybody that are valued at over $150. So if you stick around to the end, I'll tell you about how to get those. So let's get started with a quote from Andrew Grove. He's the former CEO of Intel. And his comment is, "Success breeds complacency, complacency breeds failure, and only the paranoid survive." So what does that have to do with our topic today? Well, the thing I want to point out is just because you haven't been the victim of an attack yet, because you haven't gotten a virus or had your identity stolen, doesn't mean that you shouldn't worry about this. Doesn't mean that the threat's not real, and we can't sit on our laurels. It's something that we have to really consider and be paranoid about. A real quick overview of what's going on in the cyber crime business these days. And by the way, it is actually a business. It is organized. China has announced publicly that they have a division of the government that is involved in cyber criminal activities. So it is actually a business, and people make money and a living off of this. Although some people do it for fame and glory, there are groups of hackers that this is what they do to make a living. So the evolution of crime. We're going to go way back to the beginning where we had this guy. So this guy was the mugger that came up in the dark alley and robbed you. He was the guy that rode up on the horse and maybe held you at gunpoint, but he was a guy. And along comes some new technology. And the new technology, in this case in my explanation, is the railroad. So the railroad offered criminals a couple of new things that didn't exist before. First of all, the technology offered a way to get access to 200 or 300 people at one time. Not only that, these people had money. They could afford to ride the railroad. And then finally, it allowed them to organize. If I get a bunch of my buddies together, and we ride out into the middle of the desert where the railroad is unprotected, except for maybe a couple of guys on the railroad. We get through that little security. We have 200 or 300 captive audience here that we can rob and get away clean. Jump off the train and ride off into the desert. Now we have computers and the internet, and that's our next evolution of cybercrime. So the sad part about this is that now these criminals can be all over the world. They can be in Russia, China, they can be anywhere in the world, and as long as you have an internet connection and they have an internet connection, you're at risk. So what I want you to realize is that this technology has brought the ability for cyber criminals to attack thousands and thousands and thousands of people, get all kinds of data regardless of where they're at. They're sitting at home, in an apartment somewhere, and they're able to work together and increase their revenue. Of course, we hear about all of these big data breaches, and you'll see in the infographic there, we hear about a lot of these, the Targets and the Home Depots. Of course, they're great big targets because they store lots of private data, and we hear about them in the news. The other important one to remember is Equifax, 143 million people exposed, and that included Social Security numbers, driver's license numbers, first, last name, address, other data like that. I just read an article in the Gazette a couple of days ago that stated that this number actually has gone up in the last couple of months, that it was worse than they thought. Here's the thing to know about the Equifax breach. The Equifax breach was caused by a security flaw in the web application that they use. So Equifax actually knew that this flaw existed because the software manufacturer had released a patch that would have closed up this security hole. They had released that patch 2 months prior. Equifax had failed to install that update, and that's what left them exposed. So an easily circumventable issue for them, but they just failed to get that patch installed when it came out. So we've looked at these great big companies, and you say, hey, we're small, nobody would bother us, right, James? Hey, why would they even hang out and make us a target? Well, unfortunately, that's kind of the wrong attitude. So some statistics, 1 in 5 small businesses fall victim to cybercrime each year, and that is estimated to be growing. Also, small businesses are considered low-hanging fruit by the cyber criminals because they know that small businesses oftentimes don't have the resources or the talent or the money to close up the security gaps. I'll give you an example. A client that hired us to do an audit, I walked into their company, and within 2 minutes I was able to access their network because they had used the default username and password on the person that installed their original router, their firewall, the first line of defense, had used the default name and password for that device, which is readily available on the internet. All I needed to know was the model, easily identifiable even outside their network. Half of all cyber attacks are aimed at small to medium businesses. That's you and me, folks. Let's talk a little bit about the digital underground's thriving black market, and it is a black market, and it is thriving. There are forums, and you'll hear the term now go around called the dark web, the dark parts of the internet. There's a black market on the internet. It's not science fiction. It's not the stuff of television shows. It exists. And if you'll notice, I have a number on my screen, $23. Well, what does that number mean? That is what my personal email account, if it were hacked, would be worth on the internet. So on the internet, people can buy credit card details, just details, numbers, CVC codes, things like that, for anywhere from $2 to $90. iTunes accounts sell for $8. Amazon accounts for $15. If by chance, and you can meet up with somebody and buy physical credit cards, up to $190. You can buy a card cloner on the internet for as low as $200. You know, those are those things that even happened here in Rock County. They go on gas station pumps, and you put your card in, and you think, it's not working, and it's really a cloner that's stealing the data off the credit card. You can buy one of those on the internet. Fake ATMs, if you want one, you can buy one for 35 grand, getting a little steep. The shocking part about this, of course, is that anyone can easily buy training, the tools and software to do this. They can learn how to hack. They can buy this information easily on the internet. And just to give you an example, as an IT professional, we use tools to access passwords. They're used legitimately, and we can use tools that will reveal your QuickBooks account. If you've lost your QuickBooks account, we can purchase a tool that will unlock that account. It's not expensive, and but of course, in the wrong hands, that tool can be used to get at your data, even if that file is password protected. $225, what does this number mean? Well, a report done by the Ponemon Institute, hired by IBM to look into this, said this was the amount per record, the value per record stolen on average for a piece of stolen private data. What it doesn't include, however, are the reputational damages to your company, the loss of clients if it gets out that you have been hacked or compromised, any class action lawsuits or individual lawsuits, legal fees, compliance lawsuits if you fall under one of those companies that have compliance issues, the replacement of the data. This is especially true of viruses and crypto lockers and things like that. Downtime and loss of productivity, of course, as the IT company comes in and cleans it up. So just because you're small, the point I want to drive home with all of this is that it doesn't mean that your data, it doesn't have value. 350,000 new malware threats are being released per day. Every day, 350,000 new pieces of malware, that's virus-related software being released. What does this mean for us as a small business? That antivirus protection, they can't keep up. IT companies can't keep up. They just can't keep up with the rapid deployment of this type of software. Quick note about bank fraud. The FDIC does not protect you from bank fraud. It's there to protect you against bank insolvency and things like that. But if a hacker or a cyber criminal identity thief gets access to your account or convinces you to transfer money, basically fraud, out of your account, that's not covered. Social media happens to be one of the largest security leaks right now. 600,000 Facebook accounts are hacked every day, and this is a sample email that's made to look, a phishing email that's made to look like one that comes from Facebook. And of course, if you click the link and try and update your Facebook details, of course, it's a fake website that captures your information. So why would anybody want to get into your Facebook or social media account? Well, of course, the more I know about you, birthdays, holidays that you like, hobbies, the more I can use that to gain additional data that I can then use to access your accounts. One other thing business owners need to know about social media is also a threat because of the loss of productivity. You'll notice that even at the 3% mark, if 3% of your employees are spending 10 hours a week on the internet, on Facebook or something like that, that is a cost associated with your company. Let's talk a little bit about ransomware. This is probably one of the biggest threats right now out on the market. Ransomware is a special type of software. It gets into your network either via a link that you click, an attachment to a file that you open, a website that you visit that maybe even has a virus installed on an ad. So MSN and Yahoo have ads on their pages. The ads are served up by large companies that just sell ads and rotate them, and criminals have been known to infect your computer using the code in those ads. So the way ransomware works, CryptoLocker is the big one everybody seems to recognize, is that it gets installed and then is very quiet. It sits in the background and encrypts all the files on your network, and when it's done, the ransom appears. Here's a personal story. We were hired to do an audit for an insurance company in the area, and he related a story to us whereby he did get infected with ransomware, and they of course, demanded some amount of money. It was a couple $1,000. I don't remember what it was. But he refused to pay these guys the ransom. So his the way he got around that, not paying the ransom, which he was very proud of, was that he erased every computer, bought new ones, bought a new server, paid the IT company to rebuild his network and rebuild his data from all of its backups. Either way you look at it, he lost in that scenario. He ended up spending thousands of dollars on this. Spam is the largest way that either via social engineering, like in that Facebook ad email that I showed you, or by clicking on links. This is the biggest way cyber criminals infiltrate our networks and get into us right now. So spam is the current preferred medium, I guess you'd call it. So I've painted a pretty grim picture here, and you might be saying, well, James, how do we protect ourselves? What do we do to protect ourselves? Well, at the Computer Center, we have this layers of security philosophy, and I will tell you that there is nothing that is 100% secure. So I want you to think of your data and all of your customer files and all of that information like a king of old thought of his treasure. And the king would put his treasure in the treasure room and he would lock it up, and then he would put guards in front of it, and then of course that was in a castle, and the castle had large towers with archers and oil that they could dump on the attackers on it, and then he'd have this large portcullis that he would close, and that would pull up the drawbridge, of course, and then there was a moat, and he may have built that castle next to a large mountain, so there was only one way of entry. But basically, lots of layers of security. If they got through one, they had to get through the next one, and then the next one, and the next one. And that's really the way you need to look at security in a small business. So here are our 7 layers of security. The first, most basic foundation goes back to the Equifax. Updated operating systems. Of course, everybody knows Windows XP. I hope none of you have a Windows XP machine still in your organization. But Windows XP is no longer safe because Microsoft said we're not going to patch it against security updates anymore. However, every piece of software you use, the Adobe Acrobat, the Java, the web browsers, Microsoft Office, all of those pieces of software need to be updated regularly. The release of updates and patches is rarely for a feature. It's typically to patch a security hole. However, I want you to think, what happens when that automated little pop-up comes up in the corner of your screen on Monday morning and says, Adobe Acrobat must install an update? And of course, everybody says, no thanks, not now. Not now, because of course they know that it's going to take a reboot. So a couple of things about updating your operating system. You have to have, in your software, you have to have a system in place. Something has to happen that makes sure that these are updated in a timely fashion. Next, you can't just set it and forget it and rely upon the automated systems, because of course people can say no to them, they can stop a reboot which will finalize it, and patches fail all the time. So you really want a system that has somebody actually looking. Did the patch install? Did it actually work? Is it installed on the machine and working properly? And can we do this, say, after hours? So you really need human involvement in this portion of it. So if you've got a company that's got a set it and forget it attitude, I'm going to tell you that they're doing you a disservice by doing that. Next, hardware and software firewalls. I gave you that example of that company that we visited. They had a firewall in place, but it wasn't properly configured. Every time you need to get out to the internet, to visit a website, to send an email, to communicate with your server back at the office, whatever it may be, we have to poke a hole in this firewall. Well, a lot of firewalls come off the shelf with all the holes open, so you need a properly configured firewall that closes as many of the holes as we possibly can and only allows certain traffic in. Very important. Antivirus software is still one of the first lines of defense. Again, I'm going to say that you're going to want something that's monitored, that a human being is looking at, because what does virus first attempt to do? It attempts to turn off and uninstall that software. And of course, if the antivirus software gets turned off, it's not doing its job. So you want to have somebody that's monitoring that on a daily basis that says, hey, look, John's computer is no longer protected by the antivirus software. What happened to his antivirus software? We should see what's going on there. Web filtering is the next layer, and web filtering does a couple of things for us. First of all, web filtering protects us from all of those links we might click. So we click that link, or if you're typing in a web URL in your browser and maybe you mistype it, so instead of Google, Google, you type Googel. People buy up those misspellings and build fake websites that infect you. Web filters stop that. They keep databases much like antivirus software, and they attempt to protect you at that level. The other important part about web filtering is a good web filter will also allow you to say, you know what, only the marketing person in our company really needs to have access to Facebook. And the HR department is really the only person that should be looking at or posting resumes and things like that on Indeed or Monster.com. So we're only going to allow those people access to the internet. And that's another cost saving and protection for web filters. Email filtering, at first glance, is going to protect you against spam, and that's an important part. We want to stop that email from getting even to your servers or into your email boxes. However, a good spam filter, a good email filter, is also going to include a couple other features that are really important and often overlooked. They are going to have an additional layer of filtering for those web URLs, those web links, that if they do show up, it's going to pass through their systems before it sends you on to the website. Good web filters work both ways, not just to protect you against incoming garbage, but also to protect accidental outgoing garbage. or protected information. For example, a good web filter will spot if somebody sends a social security number out or a credit card out through email, which, by the way, email travels in just plain open text. So anybody that has any software anywhere between you and its intended recipient can read those emails and intercept them. So a good web filter is going to protect against outgoing accidents as well. Another good part about email filtering is the ability to archive data. Again, as an employer, knowing what comes and goes out of the organization is important. Even from the fact of, somebody's sick or out and you want to go back and trace the communication between a vendor, for example. It's helpful to have. Closer to the top of the list is a backup and disaster recovery solution. It's no longer good enough to just, back up the files, back up my QuickBooks files, back up my my Word files. We really need a disaster recovery solution that allows us to recover from things like ransomware. So here's what to look for in a good disaster recovery solution. A, it needs to happen more than once a day. The days of, one backup per night, long gone. This needs to happen 2, 3, 4, 5 times a day. That way, if you get infected at 4 o'clock, you're not missing a whole day or two's worth of work. You're missing maybe a couple of hours. Reduces your cost to recover. The other part of disaster recovery is to protect against hardware failures and things like that. How quickly can we get back up and going? In the case of ransomware, these types of solutions that go beyond a backup and actually add a disaster recovery component are highly important because, of course, we just go back to before the infection happened. And then finally, education. We unfortunately are the weakest link in all of this. It is us, the staff members, and we can put in all of this tech and all of these layers, and yet it's still us that pick up the phone and answer the call from supposedly Microsoft that says, hey, we've noticed that your computer is sending out lots of viruses. If you take a moment to let me get connected to your computer remotely, I'll gladly repair them. And yes, those calls are scams. Microsoft does not do that. But it is people falling prey to human engineering. I'll give you another perfect example. Remember when all of those Yahoo accounts got attacked? Here's what happened to a client of ours. His Yahoo account was compromised, and the attacker would log into these accounts and send an email. Hey, James, this is Jeff, and me and my, of course he has access to the email, so he knew all about this person. Me and my partner are traveling in London, which of course I know they do, and that was revealed in their emails. And we got into a bind. We lost our cell phones. I'm at a public kiosk. I need you to transfer some money. Will you really help me out? I'm really in a bind. Transfer some money to my account. I'll send you the money. And of course I could reply to that email, and because the hacker had access to the email, they would reply back. And this went on for a couple of years. This type of scam went on. Again, it's nothing that can get caught by the technology. We have to educate us, ourselves, and our staff on how to recognize these threats and how to deal with them and what to do when they come in. So, running close to time here, and I know I went through things really quickly. That's my 30-minute Thursdays. But the bottom line is we need to get really serious about protecting your company against cybercrime. So what does that look like? Well, first of all, the first 6 layers of technology that we talked about in that layer pyramid. I mean, you got to have those in place. You got to have somebody you trust looking at those. You have to have somebody reviewing them, and they just have to be in place. Don't use a set it and forget it attitude or set it and forget it software or a company that says, hey, we're just going to turn this on and walk away. If somebody is not watching this stuff, they're not checking your backups, they're not testing them, they're not looking to see that the patches got installed automatically, then they're doing you a disservice. Software fails, antivirus gets uninstalled, and things just don't work. If it all worked, I really wouldn't have a job. So that's just kind of the way it is. But you need to have somebody looking at it. And then lastly, you need to educate yourself and your employees because we are truly the weakest link. We need to learn about security, passwords, what's a scam, what's a not, things like that. So again, to wrap things up, if anybody wants, if you're here and you want to go to computer-center.com/AUP, I am in the process of finalizing an acceptable use policy template. This template you can then fill out. It does a couple of things for you. It helps you think about your policies. Is it okay for employees to bring mobile devices and connect them to my network? Is it okay for employees to install software on my network? Again, as speaking as a business owner, these are business level decisions that need to be made. And the policy gives you a way to communicate that. Here's what I think is acceptable. A lot of times we don't have those conversations because A, we don't know where to go with them, and we don't have a tool like this. So if you want to go there and sign up for it, I'll get that out to you in the next few days here as I polish that up. I'm almost done with that. And I also mentioned that the next step is to educate your employees to protect your data. And there's really only one way to do this, and that's to get your employees some training and educated. So everybody that's on the call today, on March 22nd, I've hired a cybersecurity, Frank Salisbury, a cybersecurity trainer to come in to our location here in Janesville and put on a employee education seminar called the Essential Cybersecurity Training for Your Staff. It's for business owners and their staff to come in and learn how to protect themselves, how to identify this stuff, and some practical tips to make sure that they are protecting their identities, not only their own, but also your company's identity. Everybody on this call is entitled to up to 5 tickets. Tickets will have a value of $30 each per seat, but I'm certainly willing to give anybody that's sat in on this call up to 5 of them today. So you do need to register, and you can do that by going to securityseminar.info. That's securityseminar.info, and you can sign up to get those tickets. All right, so I want to thank everybody for attending today. I certainly appreciate your attention and for sticking around with me. If there are any questions at all, go ahead and you can type them into the chat, and I'll try and answer them and get to those. And if I don't get a chance to answer them all today, I'll try and shoot you out an email. Also, I would ask if you're interested, every Tuesday I have an email newsletter that goes out and has tips and tricks in it. It's called the Tuesday Tidbits. There's usually 3 or 4 of them. And right now we're also going through each week a security tip of the week as well. So. One quick question that did come up was about email filtering. Yes, a good email filter has both inbound and outbound. It filters both ways, not just against spam. So you really want to look at one that bills itself as email filtering, not just spam filtering. Other questions? All right, well, if you think of something in the meantime, certainly shoot me an email and I'd be glad to answer them. I do thank everybody for joining us today and appreciate your attention. I will send out a quick survey. I'm looking to have more of these on a more regular basis, but of course I need to know what content you want to see. So if you take a few minutes after I send out that survey to tell me what I did great, what I really stunk at, and give me some ideas for upcoming topics, I'd appreciate it. Again, thanks for attending, and I look forward to seeing you on March 22nd for our staff security training. Feel free to spread that around with your other business associates and people in your office. Thanks, and have a great day.